Hello,
Um,
everybody, and welcome to this evening's talk. We'll just give it a few more minutes while everybody's joining us this evening. I will just launch a poll because it's always interesting to see where everybody is coming from today. So you can click on there and let us know whether you're coming from England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Europe, or even beyond that as well. We'll let that poll run for a few moments and give people a chance to answer. Although it seems like the majority of people are unsurprisingly from England, but we have got a couple of people from overseas as well. So do let us know in the chat where you're joining from exactly. I'm here in Ely in Cambridgeshire, just a few minutes down the road from the museum today, where we are still enjoying beautiful, beautiful sunshine, although it's definitely still a little bit cold and certainly still very cold in the cathedral. Seems like everyone has answered the poll. So indeed, 83% are from England, and then a couple of people from overseas as well, which is lovely. So I wanted to begin by introducing Surinder Warboys, who is giving us this talk this evening, Stepping Stones to Steeples and Towers. And we're delighted to welcome her this evening, and especially because Surinder's newest exhibition, Whispers from Nature, opened at the museum last week on Saturday, and we're absolutely thrilled to have it on display at the museum until November of this year. And I'm sure following Surinder's talk this evening, many of you who can find your way easily to Ely, perhaps not those of you who are overseas, will be able to enjoy the exhibition. The exhibition brings together glass works made using Surinder's unique muller technique. And in these remarkable works, the muller, which is a tool used for grinding and mixing glass, is used as a mark-making tool. In this series of works, the patterns of kind of the human body through the veins and the pilaries and all of that are brought together also with the photography of the terrain. And it's a really fascinating exhibition, and absolutely one that is worth coming to see if you can. Surinder studied fine art and stained glass at the Wimbledon School of Art and the Newport School of Art in South Wales. And in 1990, she established her own studio specialising in architectural stained glass, conservation and tuition. As well as her commissioned work, Surinder has always maintained a paralleled personal practice with a particular interest for experimental work. Her work explores the dynamic and expressive qualities of light and shade, texture, and pattern. And Surinder uses her experience as a conservator to use oils and paints and stains in new and experimental ways, which allow her to make allusions to the meteorological and geographical phenomena. Her major commissions have included many large public buildings, including churches, schools, and hospitals, as well as small, more intimate spaces within private dwellings. Her work has appeared in publications in the United Kingdom and abroad, and she's been invited to lecture at Sunderland University here in the UK and Chandigarh School of Art and Architecture in India, amongst many others, as a visiting artist. Surinder's experimental work on glass has also twice been selected for exhibition at the British Glass Biennale. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Surinder with us here this evening and to have her exhibition at the museum. Just before Surinder begins, I will also point out a couple of features of the Zoom platform that we're on. You can react using a little heart button or give the thumbs up if you particularly agree with a point or love a point that Surinder is making. And also you have the chat function along the bottom. It should be along the bottom of your bar if you're on a computer, and at the top of the bar if you're on a phone or an iPad. And you can leave comments and questions there for Surinder, which we will ask or put to her at the end of the talk. So with that, I will hand over to Surinder.
Well, thank you, Emily. Okay, this is Stepping Stones. It was my first commission after leaving art school. I had spent most of 4 years studying colour through painting in oils for watercolours. I did have the opportunity of making a small stained glass panel in my first year, but felt extremely disappointed with the painting. I had been smitten by the colours in the handmade antique sheets of glass, but painting on a glossy surface seemed far too challenging at that time. It was 7 years later, on moving to Ipswich, with its many spires and towers, that I would pick up the threads from where I had left off. Since early childhood, I've been interested in church architecture, its textures and decorative features. We moved to Ipswich and we turned the front room of our Victorian terraced house into my studio and started making panels for our front door. Every now and again, we would change the panel in the door as another one got made. On changing it a third time, a church warden knocked on the door asking if we would consider doing some restoration on one of the leading leaded lights in the nearby Methodist church. News spread to the Baptist church, and whilst working there, news had spread even further. I received a call from the East Anglian Daily Times asking if they could do a little article. So when the reporter came, this panel with the curtains was leaning against my studio window. The reporter asked to take a picture and suggested for me to step outside and look in through the curtains. The next morning, the picture of me appeared on the front cover of the paper. Oh my. Within days, I received a call from the architect of the diocese, who was responsible for 78 churches across Suffolk. Now this is St Lawrence's Church in the heart of Ipswich, with the most beautiful tower and a really lovely flint here. St Lawrence had been redundant for some 30 years, and the nave's stained glass windows had suffered much damage. As funds became available from the Elizabeth Walters charity for the restoration of St Lawrence's, intermittently over a period of 23 years, the 6 nave windows were restored, including the east window by Charles Gibbs, made in 1864. This truly was an inspirational building. I felt very fortunate working there, sometimes working alone, doing in situ work from morning to dusk. These are images from some of the windows. This was, it shows some in situ work, and other panels, lights had to be removed completely to do the restoration. And this is the east window by Charles Gibbs, and the window was based on the life of Christ. It was a most well-made window. Having experienced many windows and dismantling them and reassembling them, I noticed the glass, each piece of glass in this window was beautifully cut and it fitted like a jigsaw. So I thought it was quite an exceptional window and beautifully designed. These were the nave windows, very high, about 25 feet high and 10 feet across. Many aspects of the church interested me, and this image is taken from the top of the tower, St Lawrence, from the parapets looking out across Ipswich. I did take many photographs through the openings, panoramic views. So 15 years after I had actually been working on churches, I made a visit to England. I left when I was very, very young, and in 1999 I went there. And I was really amazed to see the architecture in the village where I was born. It had parapets around all the buildings, around all the houses, that had flat roofs, and reminded me of the churches I'd been working on. This is Petter The group of images here show before and after conservation work. There was hardened weathering deposits on the surface. This image isn't in very good photos, but it will give you an idea. The hardened weathering deposits can be seen on the surface of the glass. I was fascinated by the texture, which had taken hundreds of years to form. I almost felt reluctant to remove it at first. On removing it, the lengthy work was rewarded by the discovery of very graceful glacé work. For the occupants of Petter Street, it was as if a dark cloud had lifted. This image here shows the east window of St Mary's Church, St Mary the Virgin's Church in Mellis. And what I loved about it were the reflections on the north chancel wall, which acted like a blank canvas. And in the early morning, during midwinter, this transmitted light can be seen moving gradually across the wall. The image here shows Roland, my husband and partner. doing a full-scale cartoon drawing for Fresenfield Church, St Peter and St Paul's of Fresenfield. And here I'm waxing the pieces that have been cut, waxing them up so I can hold them against the light and see how the colours work. So this is how they worked. I was really very pleased, and because it was 50 feet high, I felt it didn't require any detailed work or painting, because from ground level it just wouldn't be seen. So the way we approached the project was to use very intensely coloured glass, which would have an impact on the surrounding architecture, as you can see here. The window was designed by Roland, and I translated his watercolour into the stained glass. So this next image is night and day from St Nicholas Hospice Chapel in Bury St Edmunds. The following works could be related to the elemental and cyclical nature of life. Night and Day started as a large single painted shoot, fired and stained with silver nitrate. It was then cut and plated with coloured antique glass, which had been etched in a few places. In the painting, I used diaper techniques, that is, scratching into the dry painted surface. The chapel was a small, intimate space without windows, but with large double doors which could be opened onto a much larger area. The panel was backlit and suspended with brackets in the opposite corner. When this panel was completed, I placed it on an easel in front of my studio window and studied the light from it over a period of 24 hours. I liked the quality of the changing light from dawn to twilight, so arranged to have a dimmer switch installed. I used similar techniques of making in Hellespont, this one, and in Prometheus, which you will see in a moment. However, I began to replace the brush for a sea sponge, and the paint was becoming much lower in viscosity. And these two pieces were exhibited outdoors. It was a challenge to exhibit large stained glass out in the open. Once a study but elegant frame was designed to support and stabilize the panel, I was excited to find a new way of experiencing stained glass. One could walk round all the way and view both sides without negotiating doors. But what really excited me was the interplay of oak trees and movement from a passing breeze with the glass. This is a detailed one from Nicholas. The next few pieces are experimental works, exploring environmental and atmospheric phenomena. Horizon. Looking westward from where I live, there are fields which dip and rise again toward the horizon. I have sometimes enjoyed watching dark weather fronts forming and releasing veils of rain in the distance. This one I called Soldier Beetle. It shares a similar theme. It was a collaboration with a soldier beetle that landed on the moist paint just as I thought I had finished. It left minute footprints as it struggled to escape. Seeing the problem, I offered it a pointy little paintbrush to climb up, which it did. The quality of painting in these pieces was so that I would mind if any drips of paint fell on them. And if they did, I would then start all over again. And I'll just point out the soldier beetle's footsteps over here. So this is from Loose Chapel. I have always found cows creatures of curiosity, which led to the Loose Cattle series of works. Making an observational drawing of wildflowers on Nellis Common, I sensed some strange noise behind me. On turning round, I saw the herd of Charolais cattle had moved from the far side of the field and lined up behind the thin electric wire, all looking in my direction. In sheer excitement, I immediately turned my focus on them, and for the next 2 years, they became central to my work. My cattle paintings were like a dance with the elements, particularly water, in which the accidental splashes and drops are celebrated. First thing each morning, I would go and make rapid charcoal drawings from the Charolais, just to familiarize myself with their weight, mass, and movement. Then return to the studio and start painting without any reference to the drawing. No. This is Nestor's heifer. Nestor was a character in the Odyssey from Homer, and he had a marvellous herd of cattle. So not all of my work gets to the firing stage, and this is one such example which got wiped away. Thankfully, I take photos, and when I saw this, I really wish I had kept it. They are all 1 meter square because the firing chamber of my kiln is 1 meter square. The size is also determined by the physical reach of my arm across the light table. This is life ring. I measured myself so the diameter would be life size. The paint was poured from a container till the ring was completely covered and left to dry over several days. Then, as if all the power of the sea and wind was behind me, I began releasing wave after wave of water from the container across the life ring from different directions until the paint from the ring had broken up and disappeared. At the time of making this work, there was a migration crisis taking place and much news of refugees making dangerous journeys across the Mediterranean Sea. Atoll shares some of those techniques of casting waves across the circle. But you may be able to see little drops that almost look like pearls. Now, these were produced by not actually doing anything to the panel, but actually pouring paint, very low viscous paint, on the light table nearby. So the splashes from, as the water landed on my light table, the splashes fell onto the panel here, onto the surface, and created, because the paint was still wet, the splashes created these lovely pearly marks. And I was really pleased with the textures in this and the light. Chaos and order. At Myglassroom, that's my studio, I provide courses in the various aspects of stained glass. On this occasion, there was a student whose nickname was B, had come from Virginia in America to study painting with me. B was a mature student who had worked for a company affiliated with NASA, the space agency. Her work had involved tracking foreign debris in space. Looking for suitable source material to inspire her, I came across some ammonite pictures. We were both curious about the intricate patterns on the surface. Now, these work from the course can be seen on my website under the courses section. After B left, my curiosity about these intricate leafy patterns continued until I found some answers from the Sedgwick Museum of Earth Sciences in Cambridge. The leafy patterns are known as phyloid sutures. As the creature grows, it moves into a bigger chamber, and another wall is added to complete the new chamber. Phyloid sutures are where these walls meet the outer shell of the ammonite, creating a leafy pattern that we see. The more intricate the pattern, the stronger the ammonite. In chaos and order, although arrived at by different means, I found similar patterns on my muller after grinding paint, in which the combined forces of gravity, motion, and pressure produced extraordinary complex leafy patterns. Starting with the round muller, as seen in kernel, I then created different shaped mullers. The kernel used a round muller, but the earlier one you saw, Chaos and Order, I had shaped the muller in the form of the ammonite. Now, kernel was painted in 2022, and it was 2 years later that I decided to apply the stain. I had been to an exhibition in Berlin and saw a film about the dancer and choreographer Ina Bausch. We were in front of a big screen, and my 2-year-old grandson was in a pushchair looking at the screen along with us. There were 2 dancers dressed all in white, carrying white buckets. When the music started, the dancers started, they were standing in a pool of water. So when the music began, they started scooping the water and casting it in huge sheets around. So they span like a massive fishing net. And it was a very liberating feeling watching this. Later, arriving home for dinner, my daughter placed a glass of water in front of my grandson and gave us some water. But my grandson, 2-year-old grandson, who was about to turn 3, picked up the glass of water, and I thought, he must be very thirsty. But what he did was to cast the water out. He swung his arm round and he cast the water, emulating the dancers, and the water went everywhere. So there was absolute silence. My daughter simply wiped up the water and then gave him another glass of water. He picked up the glass of water and he did the same again. Wow, the power of water in art. She wiped the floor once again, but she didn't give me another glass of water. So, okay, we'll go on to the next one. This is these works were made in 2024. I had been able to influence the flow of the leafy patterns by altering the surface of the glass through etching. I had wanted to bring a human element into the work and remembered the anatomical drawings by Leonardo da Vinci that had inspired me many years before as a student. You may be able to see the etched lines here and here. It was actually from Leonardo's drawing of the fetus. I'll go on to the next one. So in this one, I added colour and plated the piece. It was etched, painted and stained and gilded. And there were peacock feathers in the corners, which I had brought back from the village where I had been born. And if you look at this piece from a slight angle, you can actually see a footprint. Maybe the next one will show us the footprint. There is the little footprint. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. So the discs are metaphors for the moon made in the month of March 2025. For millennia, the majesty of the moon has shone down on us all across the world. We, along with other earthly creatures, are accustomed to the changing yet predictable shapes of the moon during the lunar cycle. My paired and squared moon endeavours to bring attention indirectly to the harmful exploitation of the earth. So to be mindful of the fine balance of the planet and its ecosystems. I think this is the fine piece. I call it my Indian watercolours. Now, I made a visit to the Ajanta caves a few years ago, and it's a place where I had wanted to go ever since I was a student. And when I did go, I discovered so much more than I had ever anticipated. It was one of the most remarkable places I had visited. And it's taken a long time. You know, sometimes when you make a visit like this, it takes time to assimilate the place and the power it has held. So these are my current works, and I must thank you actually for asking me to do this talk, because doing the research for it, I've discovered going through previous works, I came across this series of watercolours. They're very small, not so big. And this is what I'm hoping to do now, working with colour. So maybe it may be a completely new project from what I've been doing. I spent maybe 15 years doing monochromes, and I think it will be a joy to explore colour once again. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Surinder. And I know we're all giving you, although you can't see us all across the UK and the rest of the world, I know we're all giving you a round of applause for that fascinating insight to your work and your creative practice and how it's developed over the years. You can really see that development as it has kind of changed and evolved. I encourage people to leave questions in the chat for Surinder, which we will get to next. The chat function you can find either along the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer or a laptop, and usually along the top of your screen if you are on a mobile device, so a phone or an iPad. But as the host today, it's a host prerogative. I get to ask the first question. So while you are all busy typing in your questions for Surinder, I wanted to ask a bit more about your muller technique that you developed, that you talked about in Kernel, which is one of the ones that is obviously in the poster here, but on display at the museum. How did you come to that? Was it one of those sort of adaptations that you saw it form naturally, or did you think it would work that way and you set out to try different things to achieve that technique, or was it more of a natural evolution of your creative practice?
Well, I'd been grinding paint for umpteen years, since I've been working in stained glass. Occasionally, I would just move the muller from, after grinding, move it to a different place. And then it was actually working or looking at the ammonites, the patterns on the ammonites, around about 2017 or so. I lifted muller after a lot of grinding, and I noticed the pattern on the flat side, that I used for grinding, and I noticed this rather lovely pattern, and then I thought perhaps I can just take it a step further. And so what I did was to grind for a much longer period than if I was just grinding paint to use in a stained glass project. So I ground and ground and ground. On some of the pieces I ground away for 10 to 11 hours. It uses a lot of stamina, and on lifting, especially when I was using shaped mullers, because this one used the round muller, and it was only so big, probably about 15 centimeters in diameter, so it wasn't so hard to lift. But the ammonite, which did take about 11 hours of working on, it was extremely hard to lift the muller after grinding. I really had to exert a great deal of pressure, and I was lifting it very gradually from one edge, lifting it up, and so separating it eventually. And if I went back, I would notice that the forms inside would actually go back, and then opening them out again, they would stop. And it was air pressure which was actually flowing through the paint that was actually producing the patterns. It was the forces of nature, and it happens in tree formations, in our vascular system, so many areas of life. And so one of the pieces I did was called Breathe, and they were shaped pieces, and they also very, very difficult to maneuver and lift. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, as you say, it's the stamina to do that, but also the confidence, I think, to really feel that this process is going to, create the effect that you are hoping to, to commit 10, 11 plus hours to something like that shows real confidence in the process, as well as hope for the outcome. You also talked about, I loved how you've kind of taken natural events that have happened, or natural materials like a sea sponge, or the beetle that landed. Was it soldier beetle?
Soldier beetle.
Yeah. Another artist may have discounted that work now because it had this event happen to it. Have there been other situations where you have been able to use kind of a naturally occurring situation like that sort of chance moment that a beetle lands in your sort of practice?
Certainly. Going back to the loose cattle pieces, the one that you saw of the bull, it had a lightning-like form running through the centre of the panel, going right through the form of the bull. Now, I didn't actually see that in the painting when I placed it in the kiln to fire. Now, what I had done was, when the paint was dry, I was looking at the panel and I thought, I really need to add put some paint, a wave over in this area, so it's kind of went across like half of the panel, and the other half was dry. And when after the firing, I noticed the paint had actually separated along the edge of the piece. That was purely by chance, but I thought it added a special quality to the work, a little bit of drama, which I hadn't anticipated, and just came.
Definitely. Brilliant, thank you. We have a question from Italia, and she asks, what draws you to return to a specific panel to add or change it after a period of time has passed, such as adding stain to kernel after a couple of years? Have you ever done that previously?
Yes, I do. I have. With the kernel, I had been thinking of a way of introducing stain into it. And after seeing the Pina Bausch film and the water spreading out like a sheet, the stain in kernel was produced in much the same way. I had not quite a bucket, but a bowl of of stain. I had mixed sufficient stain to actually cast it out around the form of the kernel. And it worked. Well, it didn't work the first time. I had to wipe it off, and I think it was probably the third time that I managed to get it wiped and just left it. It was just a single kind of application, just loose.
Yeah.
No paintbrush involved, because stain is such a temperamental medium,
Yeah.
that it will show up every little mark that you make or change. But this, it was just wonderful because it was just so even. Yeah. So,
Brilliant.
and also in chaos and order, I had actually painted that and left it for quite some time, and I was thinking about how I could apply stain, and then I thought I didn't want to be precious about it, and so I just got a jam jar and dipped it in a plate of stain, and then placed it on areas of the panel around the ammonite. And it also reminded me of the early Christians when they were being persecuted. If they were in a tavern and another visitor came into the tavern, they would put if there was a ring left from a glass, they would place their glass over it, not entirely over it, but nearby, so it crossed over their mark, and it represented the sign of the fish, the sign of Christ. And ideas like that, thoughts, always come into play. I'm not a religious person as such, but I do enjoy and respect stories and cultures. So,
Brilliant. Thank you. Bristol Folk House asks, have you ever taken your pieces into the dark room to make prints with them? They are stunning pieces, and I wondered if you'd ever tried to combine other art techniques not related to stained glass with your work.
I don't think I have. I've used them for making prints, but not really involving them in another sort of discipline.
Yeah.
As such, it's been more or less painting on glass. So,
thank you. Well, if there are no further questions from our audience this evening, I would just like to highlight again Surinder's exhibition, which is now open at the Stained Glass Museum in Ely in Cambridgeshire, and is with us until the end of November, so you have plenty of time. So if you can find your way to Ely, then do come and see the museum and see the exhibition, because it really is beautiful and something that you know, is really worth seeing up close. It really is fascinating work. You can just totally get lost in just looking at all the tiny details, both seeing them as a collective body of work, but also those tiny details up close as well. It really is beautiful. And also, I also wanted to highlight our event next week, which is a rescheduled event from the week prior, which is an online Q&A with David Judson of Judson Studios and Tim Carey, the artist. And it's a Q&A following a screening of the film Holy Frit, which is a stained glass documentary that was released a couple of years ago that you can watch online in various places, Amazon, YouTube, and Apple TV. So I really encourage you to stream or download the film. It's very cheap online, a few pounds. And then if you would like to join us for the Q&A, the information is all on our website. The documentary follows Tim and David as they make the largest stained glass window ever. It's about 4,000 square meters for a colossal church in Kansas. And what started as a promotional 2-minute film for the studio, for Judson Studio, by the end ended up being about an 1.5 hour long film, following the studio as they develop the techniques for this fused glass and create this colossal window. It's a really fascinating documentary. So I encourage you to watch the documentary, and then if you would like to join David and Tim to find out more about their creative process, but also the practical process, which is quite intense when you consider a 4,000 square foot window. It's really quite something, the process they go through. So those are our upcoming events, and I just want to thank Surinder again for sharing her work with us this evening and in the exhibition. I hope you have all enjoyed this talk this evening as much as I have. And thank you, and I hope if it's evening where you are, you enjoy the rest of your evening, and if you're further afield, you enjoy the rest of your day as well. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.